Thursday here on the show. Danny Money of CanesInsight.com. Danny, good morning. How are you, my friend?
Doing great. How you guys?
Doing quite well as college football inches closer and closer. What do we got? We got about a month or so here, right? Month and a half, a month and a week. I mean,
it's 35 days till that Thursday night kickoff, I think.
Yeah, so we're close. I mean, we are close enough to really smell it as teams are going to get ready to kick off with their practices and whatnot. Here's a stat that I heard. Danny, you're going to have to help me out here and let me know if this is true or not. This is going to blow Chris Doering's mind. I read somewhere that season tickets for the University of Miami may be sold out, or at least close to selling out. True or false?
They're getting there. Those ticket numbers can always be kind of fuzzy math when you look at them, depending on, what there's every section of the stadium being sold. Obviously, Sun Life Stadium, one of the bigger stadiums in college football, is, what packages are we talking about? How many tickets are being given away? But, they're getting a good feedback. There's a lot of positive buzz from last year. People are excited. There's some good games at home. Florida, Virginia Tech is at home again this year. So yeah, people are pretty excited about the Canes, and I know people inside the university are very happy with ticket sales.
I did hear that there was a rumor, I guess, that the Florida game may be sold out before any tickets are even offered to the public, which is pretty amazing in itself. But I wanted to ask you, and I hate to be repetitive about this because it seems like we talk to you about this every single Thursday, but word that the NCAA's decision should be available here sometime in early August. At least that's what people are prognosticating at this point in time. But I thought it was interesting at the ACC Media Days, John Swofford, the commissioner, very supportive of Miami and what they've done, and really have said they stepped up and took everything that they probably should have, responsibility and accountability-wise. He hopes and doesn't expect there to be any additional penalties that come about. But when asked Al Golden, what he thought was going to happen, he didn't say anything necessarily in what he expected, but he admitted to something that I thought was interesting in that he wants this decision to be made and get it behind them. The biggest sanction for us is the sanction of uncertainty. He said, we're ready to find out and deliver us from this cloud we're under right now. We would like to have a distraction-free training camp. Rarely do you hear coaches kind of admit the effect that it's had on a team and a staff. Were you surprised to hear him kind of acknowledge this, and how big of a distraction do you think it has been? I mean, they've had a pretty good amount of success in recruiting here recently, as we talked about, despite all the sanctions hanging over them. What are your thoughts in terms of his comments, and did that surprise you at all?
I think he's just being honest. I mean, just thinking how many questions I've answered on this, I can only imagine how many questions that Golden has answered on the NCAA investigation, and the players. The players is not something that they think about on a daily basis. I mean, they're worried about being college kids, and they probably think about the same things that you and I thought of when we were in college, for the most part, along with, obviously their football responsibilities. But, it's got to be a distraction. And in recruiting, it's an enormous tool for the opposition to use when they're recruiting against the University of Miami. Coach Golden thinks he has the great sales pitch down here. That's one of the reasons he took the job with the great academic sales pitch. Certainly the amount of players that go into the pros from Miami, and the fact that a lot of kids want to live in Miami, either because it's local or because they want to be in the sun. So when you have a strong pitch like that, to have a counter pitch like this, like these NCAA sanctions, is really damaging and frustrating. So I think as it gets closer here to the end, you think a little more candid and a little more honest about what this whole process has been like. And I know he's hopeful that it'll go UM's way, and I think that's reflected in the way that he's recruiting the 2014 class and the numbers that he's taking on.
Danny Money, CanesInsight.com, our guest here on the Big Boy Radio Show, talking all things University of Miami Hurricane football related. Let me go to the ACC College Kickoff, where Duke Johnson was named to the All-ACC football team. No longer a backup. He's going to be the starter, going to get the lion's share of the carries. Really, what is the ceiling for this young man? And sort of a side note for you, obviously burst onto the scene doing a lot of things last year for Miami, including returning kicks. Is that something now as the starting running back and maybe the focal point, or at least one of the focal points of the offense, that's a responsibility that won't be his any longer?
Well, they asked Coach Golden about it, and he said as long as Duke Johnson's scoring touchdowns, returning kicks, We'll keep him out there. I think it's certainly something that they'll probably dial back a little bit just to keep him fresh at running back, because he's a threat to score touchdowns as a kick returner, as a running back, as a slot receiver. I mean, he's so dangerous that he can score in so many ways. You don't want him to take an unnecessary beating at kick return, but that's something that he'll continue to do. Miami brought in a few guys that can't handle those duties. Artie Burns, number 110-meter hurler in the country in high school. Horn Elder, Mr. Football in the state of Tennessee, very talented punt returner, very good with the ball in his hands. And then Stacy Coley, a dynamic receiver from Broward County. So there's guys that can handle the job, but if Miami's getting the ball back with, let's say, 2 minutes left against the Gators, I wouldn't be surprised if Johnson is returning that kick.
Let's go back to recruiting. We've talked an awful lot about the success that Al Golden and the Miami Hurricanes have had to this point in time. They picked up another commit in Terry McRae, a linebacker out of Ely. My question to you is, I know it's great to load all of these guys up at this point in time, but is there some concern, about what are the 21, maybe 22 commits to this point in time that you haven't left yourself much flexibility depending on what happens during this season and maybe some needs that arise? And do you think that there's some holes that maybe Miami has not addressed as well as they should have?
I don't know about holes, because if you look at the way the class is spread out, it's pretty well balanced. You have 3 quarterback commits now, likely to only be 2. I don't expect Alan Edwards to stay in this class. You have running back commitments, offensive line. You have 4 offensive line commitments, 1 receiver commitment right now, but probably more to come. A tight end commitment, a lot of defensive linemen, a lot of linebackers, and then 3 defensive backs. So pretty well spread out. I don't think it's necessarily a need issue. What your concern is, if you're the Hurricanes, is someone that just emerges on the local radar who loves Miami, just blows up as a senior, hits a growth spurt, just kind of grows into his body or just starts making a name for himself, and you don't have room for him because you promised his spot to somebody from last July. So that's the concern. But these things tend to work themselves out. We always talk about numbers, but at the end of the day, it always seems to kind of come down to who you can convince to play for Miami. And very rarely, at least since Coach Golden has been here, has there been a number squeeze. It usually just comes down to who they want in the class. So there's a slight concern that there might be upgrades available during the year and you won't be able to get those upgrades. But I think they're happy to be able to have kids that are receptive to what they're selling.
Danny Money, CanesInsight.com, our guest here on the Big Boy Radio Show. Let me ask you about one recruit in particular, and I guess depending on whether you're one of these star watchers or non-star watchers as far as recruiting services are concerned, Miami was the first school to offer a kid named Brad Kaya out of California, who at that time was an absolute unknown. I read somewhere where now he is the number 2 overall passer or number 2 overall quarterback on one of these recruiting websites and has in fact been granted the mythical 5-star status. Obviously, to me, that is a great kind of kudos to the coaching staff for identifying that talent. But as a fan, how should you look at that? Should you look at that as a guy that was a 0-star when you were recruiting him, or at the end of the day go, hey, we're excited, we got this 5-star athlete to show up?
Well, by the time he gets to Coral Gables, they're all 0 stars, and they start fresh and they start competing at that point. I remember when Ken Dorsey was getting recruited, he was a fairly big recruit, but he was a backup plan to Chris Sims, who went to Texas. And I'm sure in retrospect, Texas wishes that they would have ended up with Ken Dorsey instead of Chris Sims, or Tennessee, another school that kind of put Dorsey on the back burner to go after Chris Sims. So you really don't know until they get to college. As a fan, you obviously like to see them perform well and earn accolades. Kai has been very competitive at the Elite 11, at the opening, and really just done all the right things in the offseason. And I think Canes fans should be really excited to see what Kaya does during the regular season, because he has not had a ton of experience as a starting quarterback. He played behind a D1 quarterback early in his career, sort of split time with a running quarterback, spent a lot of time handing off to his running back, who was a Nebraska commit. So this is the year you're really going to see the reins handed to Brad Kaya as a high school quarterback. So I'm excited to see the numbers he puts up and the production he puts up against good competition out there in California.
Here in Gainesville, we're all well aware of the hype that surrounds Friday Night Lights. I believe that's upcoming this weekend. But Florida's obviously done a great job with showcasing the university in that way. Florida State has something similar. Does Miami do anything like that as well to try to garner some of that that same hype and national attention like Florida and Florida State have?
Miami doesn't necessarily do that with their camp. Their camp is more local guys competing, trying to earn a spot. A lot of guys jumped onto Miami's radar at the camp this year. Dennis Turner, Ryan Mays, two defensive backs who ended up being Miami commitments, Trayon Gray, not the big-name guys. So it's not necessarily a camp like Friday Night Lights where you have so much big-name players competing. What Miami does with the big names is they bring it down to a rising senior day, which is going to take place in early August, where they really wine and dine them, show them the school, show their parents the academic side, and really pitch the school and showcase the university. And they get a lot of commits that way, really make a good impression that way. I know they're hoping to maybe close on a couple big-name players this year at that Rising Senior Day. So that's really their big-name prospect showcase. You get some big names at the camp. A lot of times the big names just observe, maybe support their teammates, while the lesser-known guys really compete for spots at the Coach Golden camp.
Danny Money, CanesInsight.com, the best in the business covering the University of Miami football program. As always, Danny, appreciate your time, your information, and your knowledge, man. Look forward to talking to you next week as we inch again ever closer to the kickoff of the college football season.
Yep, almost there. Take care, guys.
Getting there. Appreciate it. Danny Money, CanesInsight.com.